Okay, well, we might get started. Hello, everyone, and welcome to our webinar for today. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Xanthe Golenko, and I'd like to welcome you all to this webinar on connecting people through storytelling, the power of group work. So this is the second in our series of webinars on storytelling. The first one was around individual life story projects and empowering older adults to share their voice. So this one is going to be around group story work. And I'm really excited about this session today because we've got some wonderful presentations lined up for you. So can you just go on to the next slide? Thanks, Georgie. So Bolton Clarke acknowledges all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander traditional owners of country throughout Australia and recognises their connection to land, sea, culture and community. And we pay our respect to elders past and present and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. So just some very quick housekeeping. You will all be in webinar mode, so all the attendees will be on mute with videos switched off. So please put any questions or comments in the chat. And also just confirming that we will have this webinar, a recording of the webinar available on the Bolton Clarke website. And you should all receive an email when that becomes available. All right, so just really quickly, as I said, my name is Xanthe Golenko and I'm a research fellow with the Bolton Clarke Research Institute. And I'm leading the SHARE program. So SHARE is an acronym. It stands for Storytelling in Health and Aged Care, Research and Education. And I also really want to acknowledge my colleagues from the Research Institute who are also working on this program. So Ashmita Mancha, Georgina Johnson and Judy Lothian. We've got an awesome team. I'm just so grateful to be working with such amazing people. So thank you. All right, today, very exciting. We've got lots of fantastic presentations. First up, we're going to have Rekha Singh, who's a lifestyle coordinator from Inverpine Residential Care Home, and she's going to share about her experience running story circles in the care home. Then we have Hedy Sussman, who has started a small group in Ballina and called it Conscious Conversations. So we'll hear about her experience and her work. We've also got Mark Silver and Anna Fowke from Swinburne University Wellbeing Clinic for Older Adults. So Anna, yes, was working with us with the Bolton Clarke Research Institute and was really integral in sort of getting this program up and running. So we're really grateful to have her presenting with Mark today. We've also got Daniel Weinshenker. So he's from the Story Centre in the US. Unfortunately, he couldn't be with us live, but he sent us a recording of an amazing presentation. So that'll be really great. And also I'm going to be presenting some work of the amazing Tricia Jenkins, who's from InsightShare and Digitales in the UK, and talk about her approach to story work, which is quite different again. So a great range of speakers today. Just really quickly touching back on our wonderful graphic that we still actually don't have a name for, but I guess just wanted to show that today we're going to be hearing from or seeing a range of different approaches to group work that involves several different people as the auto/biographers, some different formats, including oral, written and digital. And each approach has its own specific lens or purpose. So while there's going to be lots of different approaches today, there are some basic elements which are basically, you know, group story work are practical interventions. Storytelling, thanks Anna, that's good. That's actually a really good idea. They're a small group of individuals generally sitting in a circle, sharing stories from their own experience, focusing on a common theme. And as each person in turn shares a story, a richer and more complex story can emerge. And people see both the real differences in things about their experiences, but also stories that they have in common. And it's, I guess, group story work it's often understood as deriving from Indigenous traditions, but there are actually many variations of it. Each story circle, of course, is unique and takes on the energy of the group. So it can be light or it can be deep. And it's really socially constructed in terms of who's participating and the way people are contributing. It's extremely powerful in building relationships and creating a sense of belonging. And it's also empowering because it can build shared power and moving to action and change, advocating for change. And it's also wonderful in perspective taking, developing empathy, cultural humility, listening, courage, vulnerability, and healing. So, without further ado, I would like to introduce Rekha Singh from Bolton Clarke Inverpine Residential Care Home, who's going to share her experiences with conducting story circles. So, Rekha, do you want to just give us a little quick introduction about yourself and what your role at Bolton Clarke?
Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Xanthe and the rest of our guest speakers. So my name is Rekha, and I am a diversional therapist, and I have been here with Inverpine for the past 6.5 years. Overall, in this role as a diversional therapist for over 20 years. We found that in a story circle, has been amazing, and it's one of the best things that we have introduced to Inverpine. Our residents, family members, visitors, volunteers, including our social work students, have absolutely thrived using this technique. So, I would love to share more about this in our next conversation.
Yeah, so Rekha, do you want to describe how it actually works in terms of how did you get the residents, what actually happens in the sessions?
So in the session, we extend invitation to all our residents, visitors and volunteers who wants to be part of this session. So the story we are doing is for the residents, and how we have gathered this information is by doing one-on-one chat with them prior to selecting them or inviting them to come along. The residents have expressed to say, oh, we have already done a story book with our family members prior, but we want to do something over here. We want to tell everyone who we are. We want our loved ones to know some of the things they might not know, that how did I met their father, or how did I meet the grandparents. So it's been amazing. So what we did after that is, once we have got this information from our residents, we've invited them in a circle. There were some residents who didn't wish to be part of the circle. They wanted to be part of the session, but they wanted to do it individually. So we needed to see what residents we can mix them during a session, because sometimes they overtake the conversation, and some of them, they are very private. They still want to tell everyone about their story and who they are, but more in a private way. So by getting to know our residents, understanding who they are, we were able to separate them and still meet their needs, but in a separate areas.
Yeah, thanks. So I think that's really important when you thinking about residential care home or other communities, that some people really thrive in group work, others do tend to prefer the individual work. So, and some like both,
Yes. Yeah, and as I mentioned earlier, there are some residents, they might overtake a conversation, or there could be some who might have difficulty. They might not have that strength to come and talk within a group setting. Some they want to be private, some they still want their stories to be shared, but they don't want others to judge them of the things they have done in their lives as well. So we listen, we want them to still be appreciated, we want them to be heard, and some, they might have difficulty speaking, so they might not be at the same level as the other residents. So it's good to be very mindful when you're doing a group session of how you mix the residents and what their abilities are or limitations.
Yeah, okay. So you mentioned briefly that you have students involved as well. Do you want to just talk a little bit about the students and what they're doing there and their involvement?
Absolutely. We feel very privileged that we were able to have students from QUT. We've had them for 2 lots now, so beginning of this year, and they left only here at the beginning of November. So altogether we've had 5 students, and it was amazing to see students coming over here and being exposed in an aged care and the experience they have had doing story circle and learning to do their hours and using some of the techniques of deep listening, knowing like CBT therapy, also understanding like how to do like probing questions, understanding dementia. It's been very important. So what we did with the students was, prior to having them sit down in a session, we got them to like build rapport with our residents by taking them for a walk, but just going and doing other activities before they could build rapport, and then we invited them to come and start doing the sessions either as a group or individual.
Yeah. So yeah, just to clarify, so these are actually social work students?
Yes.
Yeah, yeah. So they've got a little bit of that sort of background, you know, theoretical understanding and developing their skills in those areas.
Absolutely. And and as we all understand, like sometimes we might have that theoretical understanding of what do we do, how do we apply that, but then when it comes to being able to talk with a resident individually and applying those theoretical skills in practical, it sometimes can be difficult. They need to be mindful of how you talk with the residents, what do you address, are the stories they're telling you, are they actually factual? In the mind, it could be factual. A resident living with dementia, they want to tell the story, but do we know if what they're telling is like, you know, are we in the right track? So sometimes it is important to cross-check, but letting them validate what they're saying at that time.
Yeah, yeah. Thanks. Is there anything that you would say, like some specific challenges or something that people would probably need to be mindful of doing this work in residential care?
Absolutely. As I mentioned, if we're having students, most of the students are of a younger age, and getting them to understand how to have a deep and meaningful conversation with our residents from that particular era, of how we address them, how do we, you know, what is the appropriate language, and when to use some of your probing questions and when to hold back. So it is very important, like, not to push them so much, because like we've also had residents who has participated in the program. They might have had drug and alcohol abuse as part of their history. We've had residents who are war veterans. So it is very important of what we ask them and how we ask them, and understanding and appreciating their story, and while maintaining their privacy and dignity.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. And I think that's really important. And I know Anna and Mark will touch a little bit more on that as well in their presentation. So just to finish up, are there any tips for people out there who want to set up programs like this that you would suggest?
Look, I think it's a great initiative, and some of the key questions that Anna has actually shared with us, I will definitely recommend anyone out there in the community or in aged care facilities who wishes to take that. They're great key questions to start on that. So you will start with those questions that will lead into so many more things that you can get and learn and, you know, gather from there. So I would definitely recommend this program, and I would also add that please take on board those key questions that has been created for something to ask about.
Great. All right. Thank you so much, Rekha. We're just so grateful that you've taken on this project and been really supportive and got it up and running at Inverpine. So thank you so much for that.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
All right. Okay, well, thank you so much, Rekha. I'll now actually hand over to Hedy, who is going to be talking to us about her group that she's started up in Ballina in northern New South Wales. So, Hedy, can I just hand it over to you to sort of introduce yourself and tell us how the group came to be?
Yeah. Okay. I came to Ballina 3 years ago, and I was sort of called up to this area by my son, and I had an illness at that time, and it's like, you know, you're getting to the pointy end of life. I think you should move closer. So reluctantly, I sort of came, and I had no background to the town itself, and I knew nobody. So my first task was to find like-minded people that I could share with, and I was looking for spiritual groups, and there's a great cohort of, I guess, third agers in Ballina. It's very much that sort of town, but I couldn't find.
Hedy, sorry, I'm just going to interrupt you. Can you turn your camera back on, please? Sorry, we can't see you.
Is that on?
The camera up the top.
Okay.
Yeah, beautiful.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sorry, yes. So it was really looking for a cohort of people that sort of liked the same things that I did. And that's always a starting process in a new town. And I couldn't stumble across exactly what I wanted. So the call is, you know, if you can't find it, do it. So I decided I would start up a little circle of like-minded people. I got onto Facebook, into the information boards, and posted that I'd like to start with a very small circle of people, because we meet in my place, which is quite small. I'm in a 2-bedroom unit, so there was really boundaries, and there was, you know, in terms of space, and at that stage also COVID had started, so there are all these considerations, but I had a few people, and I guess the maximum number was about 8 that we have that comes along regularly. And through that recruitment on Facebook, and also meeting up with people. So that's where it started, in a very small way, but in an intimate way. So ideal for me, and I think also for them.
Wonderful, thank you. So do you want to just explain a little bit how your project works, like how the stories work,
Sure.
what you
Sure.
talk about, how you structure some of the activities?
Yeah. So I guess my own background in more mature times has been a study in social ecology and also expressive arts. So this is something I wanted to translate into our group work. So really what it's about is exploring the dimensions of self. And, you know, this is essentially storytelling. This is telling each other, sharing, listening. And there's a indigenous word, it's called Dadiri, and I don't know if you know it, but you know, I sort of came across it and it's like, wow, that's the word I want. It's something like, the background to the word is, it's very sacred and attentive listening and communicating. So this is really, I guess, what our group is about. It's really about exploration. It's about growth. It's about finding out unexplored areas of oneself. So this may be our deficits, it may be also our strengths, and there's a balance in those two areas. So the sort of group work we do is, as the name of the group, which is conscious conversations. There's a lot of the spoken, the, you know, inner circle, we share in that way, but also we find that when we come into pairs and speak in a, I guess, even in a deeper manner, you know, sharing with one person is very different to sharing in a group. So that tends to be really a call to stand up for self. And we find that there's greatest, I guess, really deep enjoyment of that type of sharing. So one person acts as a witness, the other person tells their story. It may be on a particular subject. It may be their approach to an image, what they think of a particular image, and how, whether that sort of is very similar to the partner they're sharing with or dissimilar, and then to discuss what is it that makes us who we are? What are our differences? What are our similarities? So that's one way. Also, we look at an exploration of ourselves. going beyond our comfort zones. So there have been a few occasions where we've sort of gone out into the territory, the local area, and done things that I guess is sort of borderline. Would you really want to do that? Is that the sort of thing you'd want to do? And I'll give you an example. There was like, break your fear barriers, go out into the neighborhood and talk to strangers. Now, that's not normally the way I'm sort of being brought up. So I actually experienced quite a bit of fear doing that. But nevertheless, it was such a rewarding thing to do, to go beyond that fear barrier. So there's a whole variety of things. At the moment, we've got a study going in terms of rice. We've sort of using the work of Dr. Imutu, who was a Japanese scientist, where he got people to label jars and put in cooked rice. And so in that cooked rice, you've got one jar that you simply ignore, and the other jar you beam goodness, kindness, happiness towards that other jar, and just to imagine the difference and just to see what comes out of that experiment. I think we've got a visual of on the jar that was being ignored, we've got the natural decay occurring, and on the jar that we've beamed through this positive energy, it still has yet to come. Obviously, in the end, both jars were consumed by decay. They were sitting on a hot mantelpiece, and they had to succumb to the laws of nature. But it was really clearly demonstrated that the one jar that we're beaming, the goodness and the positivity, was very much retarded in turning into that decay until a point where it became inevitable. So it was really, it's like, what is the power of your thinking? Does it really affect other people in that way? Does it affect your environment? So this was a demonstration, and I think demonstrations are more powerful than words. So it's demonstration to yourself, the power of your thinking.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Hedy, I love the work that you're doing. It's just absolutely incredible. And what an incredible group of people that you must have, brought together and taken them on this journey with you. So how long has the group been going for now?
We've been meeting now for 2 years, and we started during the COVID area, when it was scary. We decided it would be don't ask, don't tell response. You come if you feel you should come along. And we continued right throughout meeting. And I guess that really speaks of the importance of the group, certainly to myself. I feel as if I've grown exponentially since I've been holding this group together. It's really democratic. Everybody, if they want, has an opportunity to lead the group in their particular area. But it's also been extraordinarily compassionate, and the learning has come through compassion, I feel. And so that has been sort of, I guess, instructive to all of us. Whereas, if I reflected on my own way of being in the world, and, I've got masks behind me, which are not there by accident. It's really to speak about the way I've masked myself during, my lifetime. It's about, revealing what is under the mask. And at times, everybody has their failures. And, I was very punitive towards my own failures. And so it's been learning to be very compassionate, to look at, those, quote, failures as maybe they weren't failures when they were applied. They might have been entirely the right approach, but if they become our default, then that is where they need to be challenged, maybe. So, from a strength, they become a weakness. So it's looking at those areas of how we structure our approach to the world. And it is compassion. It it's like holding your inner child and saying, there, you know, I'm with you. So we're using spiritual approaches. We're using, I guess, the areas that we understand about quantum mechanics, about we're all in it together, we're all one, and using that as a guideline in terms of our maximum exposure to growth and ultimately to freedom.
Yeah.
Freedom of expression, freedom of, you know, being comfortable with ourselves, with our emotions. So it's been a growth area for, I guess, all of us.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Hedy, for sharing your work and
You're very welcome.
the way that you express the work that you're doing, and yeah, the depth of it and the importance of it is just, yeah, it really resonates strongly. So thank you so much for sharing. Love you to talk forever. We do need to go on to the next presentation, but please, people, put, you know, I've seen there's quite a few comments and stuff in the chat. So Hedy, hopefully you'll be able to hang around for the rest of the presentation, possibly answer some questions that have come up. So thank you so much. All right, I will now hand over to Mark Silver and Anna Fowke from Swinburne University Wellbeing Clinic for Older Adults, and they're going to talk to us a bit more about a therapeutically informed approach to group story work. So over to you.
Thank you, Xanthe. I think Georgie's going to share our slides. Yeah. So it's absolutely delightful to be here this morning to present to you with Mark. It's a little bit dangerous to ask Mark and I to speak about therapeutically informed group work, I think, because we get very excited about it. So yes, we'll try and stick to our limit. Mark is a social worker with lots of years of experience working with older people, or working with all people, but definitely in that area of speciality. And I'm a counsellor and have been blessed to have spent a little bit of time working with Bolton Clarke on the storytelling program, and now working with Swinburne Clinic and in private practice. So I might ask you, Georgie, to move on to the next slide. You can see here acknowledgement of country. Now, it's part of my practice as a white Australian to this is our official Swinburne University acknowledgement of country, but I just want to make it a little bit more personal by acknowledging the country where I am, which is Quandamooka country. Mark is on Yorta Yorta country, and I know that all of you are on all different countries around, possibly around the world. So we're really just acknowledging the incredible history of, we're still, if you don't mind going back, Georgie, thanks. I can be a little bit long-winded about this because I think it's really important to acknowledge country and the centuries-old wisdom that Indigenous people bring to us. So giving respect to elders past and present, and also to any First Nations people who might be with us this morning. Thanks, Georgie. I'm going to pass over to Mark now to have a little bit of a chat about the Wellbeing Clinic.
Oh, look, thanks very much, Anna and Xanthe and Georgie, for organising this incredible workshop. And what an honour it is also to follow Rekha and Hedy, because it's quite an amazing work that they've been doing. Just briefly, the clinic itself has been founded basically in 2011 at Swinburne University in Melbourne, and we decided to provide a counselling and support service for older adults, specifically in residential care, because at that time there was really nothing available. And both Professor Sunil Bar, who's the director of the clinic, and myself, over a cup of coffee, realised that we could do both. We could provide a service to older adults, not only to residents but also families and staff, but also educate mental health professionals, that's counsellors, social workers, and psychology master students. And so we did this through basically providing practicums. So we developed a training program, and we provided supervision for, we insisted on a 6 to 9 month commitment, because we realised that people have to have, older adults specifically need a longer time for relationship to develop. So it was originally face-to-face, and we embedded the students within facilities 2 at a time. But obviously during COVID, like everybody else, we actually developed a national telehealth program, which is nationwide for the students, as well as the referrals that we accept from all over. And we provide a phone and telehealth program, which is still going on. So we offer individual programs, but also have developed, as you'll hear, a bit of a unique group program that we call Therapeutically Informed, and we'll explain that soon. So it's a practicum training program. We also do a webinar series that some of you may have already tuned into, which are recorded. We do a lot of
looks like Mark's just frozen. Anna, are you able to pick up?
Yeah, sure. So also Swinburne does a lot of research into different approaches and interventions. Here he is, he's back again.
Yeah, sorry, I don't know what happened. I'm in the country, and I guess the internet's a bit wobbly. I'm really sorry. So the research programs, thanks, Anna. The research programs, we did one in dementia, and we're now doing one on people who really have cognitive impairment, but they don't actually have significant cognitive impairment, but have depression and anxiety. The one thing to say is when you have a control group, a lot of studies don't actually have control groups, but in a dementia study, what was incredible was we didn't see much improvement. It was like a straight line, a little bit improvement, but with a control group, it was a 45-degree slide. So I think that's the thing to remember, that a lot of our studies don't have control groups. So you don't actually know what you're doing in terms of, it's quite significant when you're preventing people from getting worse. So that's an important thing that we found. So we're now doing a program of 500 residents over 4 years where we have a control group and looking at, it's called Elders at Ease, and we're looking to see whether our program actually makes a difference. We also have a volunteer program, and that's really lovely. We invite often undergraduate students, social work students, and human services students to spend time doing digital stories with individuals so that they actually have something that is emotionally engaging about their past life or their multi-stories, so to speak. And we also do a intergenerational digital storytelling program with schools and older people, similar along the lines of Old People's Home for Teens. We've been doing that for about actually 15 years. I've been involved in that. And we also do a life story program where we teach workshops around things like living with dementia, living with chronic illness, writing for carers, using writing and journaling as a way of, in a therapeutic way. So we do quite a lot actually as a clinic.
Just going to jump in quickly just to say you've only got about 5 minutes left, so you might want to jump in.
Yeah, no worries. Next slide. Well, we really we turned we don't want to use therapeutic groups because they're not actually therapeutic, but they focus on interaction, developing relationships, identity, contribution, meaning and purpose. And they're helpful really because they offer opportunities for people to talk, to express their emotions, to reflect, to have a valued voice, and really focus on improved emotional well-being. And they do this through delivering a creative, supportive environment, building a sense of belonging in a community, which actually supplements what's been done already. And it's best run by mental health professionals. And it's interesting because there are no mental health professionals within residential aged care. So there may be the possibility of training and doing co-joint work. And I think that's something we can discuss. So next slide. So the principle, why are they transformative? And you'll hear later on why groups are transformative, because they focus on all those things. And if you have that framework, you really are developing an opportunity for people to delve deeper in the sort of way that Hedy's groups are very, very much would align with a lot of those things, building stronger communities, focusing on people's multi-stories, getting away from defined by their particular age group or by their disability, and celebrating diversity. And it's about the process of actually people listening to each other, communicating in a very safe, non-judgmental way. So next slide. Right, so over to Anna.
Thanks, Mark. We've identified that, or as many people have, that it's really important to work in a trauma-informed way. And I think many of you would know about trauma-informed care and a trauma-informed approach, but I think it's important to put that in context with these sorts of groups. So with people who are older, trauma, well, with anyone really, trauma is often underneath the surface. We don't know about it, and when we start to put people in groups, it may come out, and that's often something that people are fearful about. But we can't let that stop us working in groups, because as we've said, it can be so powerful and transformative. The trouble is that we really can't predict what might trigger someone's emotional responses. Sometimes that might be a big response, it might be a little response. We don't know what might trigger it. So that's what makes it so unpredictable. And again, we can't let that stop us. So the major aim of it really is to try and create a trauma-informed space, a safe space where people can feel really free to choose what they're sharing and at what level they're willing to go, how much of their life they might like to talk about, or how much of what they're feeling at the time they might like to talk about. So creating that really safe space is really important. And it's within that supportive sort of environment that we can do this kind of work that's so transformative. So, Georgie, if you can move to the next slide for me. There's lots of trauma-informed principles, different ones that different people have created. There's a three principle model, a 4 principle model, on it goes. These ones here are derived from some of the ones you can see at the bottom of the screen there, and we've discovered that they really work really well in this context. So creating safety, but how do we create safety? We give people information, we give them information on what's going to be happening, we give them ownership of the group, so they're really in control. We normalise the things that have happened to people and do all of this in a non-judgmental space. So that's about safety. Collaboration, and personally, and I think Mark would agree with me, this is one of the most important ones. Collaboration, group mutual support. Often when people are older, they're in a situation where they're perhaps starting to feel like they don't have as much of a position in life, or they're not quite as useful as they used to feel. And being in a group, being in something bigger than themselves, being able to feel that they have a role to play in supporting other people in the group can be incredibly transformational and positive for older people. Empowerment, similarly, inviting and acknowledging their voice. So if you're an older person in care, I think it's at times easy to feel like your voice doesn't matter as much as it perhaps used to. And by empowering people and inviting them, as Rekha does so beautifully into story circles, is just an incredibly therapeutic experience for people. Creating trust, that's, it's a hard thing to quantify, isn't it? How do you create that? But really talking to people about the confidentiality, really clarifying what that is, and being very transparent in where is this information going, who's hearing it, what are we actually doing here, creates an environment of trust. And choice, giving people a level of a choice in how much they share, what they share, that they're in control of that. That's a really big, important part of a trauma-informed approach, and that goes for everyone involved in the program that you might be running. Staff involved, family, residents, everyone should have all of these principles. Culture and gender awareness. This is important for all of us, isn't it? But really creating cultural safety for facilitators to know what their cultural background is, what their potential you know, the way they might look at things, the biases they might have, and then being able to hold space for everyone in the group, because you're going to have great diversity, especially if you're doing beautiful intergenerational work like Xanthe is doing. You're going to have some differences, and being able to hold that is really important. Georgie, if you can go to the next slide. Thank you. So this is here because it's such important stuff. And as I've said to you before, I identify as a white Australian. I'm not Indigenous, but in my practice, I think this is something that if we don't listen to, we will be missing an opportunity. People have been using communal healing practices forever, all over the world, and our Indigenous community in Australia, you know, have so much to offer us, and it's worth looking at and listening and understanding. And as a white Australian, coming to it from a place of respectful curiosity and learning the principles that underpin those practices can inform our group work so beautifully, and they're really in line with trauma-informed practice, things like coming together intentionally, incorporating ceremony, and addressing power imbalance. You can already see, I would imagine, that that's incredibly powerful in a place like aged care, an environment like that. So I'd really invite everyone to have a look at these two links here. Judy Atkinson is an incredible academic and practitioner working on the ground. She's in her late 70s, but she does amazing work in communities all around Australia with therapeutic trauma-informed healing practices, Indigenous practices. The Wiali Foundation, she is very much involved in that. And Miriam Rose Anguma, I remember Hedy mentioned Didiri, and I was in the background with my camera off cheering. Didiri is all about deep listening. And if you wanted to learn a little bit more about that, have a look at the Miriam Rose Foundation. Miriam Rose Anguma Bauman is the one who initially wrote and brought us the gift of Didiri, even though it goes back centuries. So have a little bit of a look at that. I'm going to hand back now to Mark.
Sorry to jump in. Yeah, we just only have a very short amount of time left. I'm really sorry to cut you short.
That's okay. But you're on mute, Mark.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, Xanthe, I know that. We just want to make two more points, that's all. One is that it's important to be aware of the need to express emotions. And I think that's really what therapeutically informed groups really are about, the need to express emotions, for people to feel connected, to build relationships, to normalise emotions, and to engender a sense of support, because there's nothing better for people to remove themselves into a situation where they're supporting others and contributing to others' emotional well-being. So that's, I think, the main point there. And the last slide, to sum up, is really the benefits are pretty, I think all of us will, I think in all the presentations, Xanthe, will get this, that it's all about making connections, restoring identity, focusing on dignity, integrity, and value, feeling a sense of control over one's life, which I think is so, so important, a sense of meaning and purpose, which is the environment in which sort of depression, you know, without meaning and purpose, depression can just soar. Hope, the instigation of hope by a group, belonging, relationships. I think relationship-centered care is something that we don't understand enough. The relationship between staff, residents, and families, normalising stigma, shame, and guilt, and addressing those issues that really are hard for people to tackle, grief, loss, or even an end-of-life issues. So I think they're the sort of things that we're talking about. So thanks, Xanthe, and sorry if we went over time.
All good. Thank you so much, Mark and Anna. And I just think it's so what I really value in this work is the idea that we really need to advocate for more mental health support in aged care, and the role of social work and other, you know, mental health professions in aged care is just so important. And I think collectively we really need to advocate for that to happen. So yeah, well done, and thank you so much for all the work that you're doing. It's incredible. All right, I'm going to introduce David Weinshenker. So as I said, he's the program director, a program director at the Story Centre in the USA, and he's recorded a wonderful presentation on his experience of conducting story work with frontline staff during COVID. So did I say the wrong name? Daniel? Oh. Yes, so he's done a recording. So Georgie, would you be able to get that started, please?
Hi, my name's Daniel Weinshenker. Thanks for having me participate. I'm sorry I can't be there live in person. My background is that I work for Story Center, which is a nonprofit organization that's been focusing on individual and community storytelling initiatives almost for the past 25, almost 30 years. And so we do work almost exclusively in groups, and it's all first-person storytelling, people telling stories from their lives, often stories that maybe they don't understand, or maybe that they don't even know at the time at which they're telling them, if one ever knows their own stories really well. I think we find that every time you tell a story, even one that you feel like you know deeply, that every time you tell it, and neuroscience has proven this to be the case as well, is that it's new every single time. And you tell it in a different way because your lived experience is different. And so it goes. So I was asked to share a little bit about those group storytelling work that we do that often involves story circles and how we hold those. And I just want to talk a little bit about a shift that we made in our work. We were almost doing exclusive in-person work. So in these group workshops, people would gather in an actual circle and share their ideas for where they were in their story, or where they weren't, and get feedback on those from people in the group. One shift that I would make was instead of people jumping in to say, here's what I think, or here's what I think you should do, and all of that stuff, was to reframe that. That was the workshop model that I kind of grew up with, and especially participated in graduate school when I was in school for writing at the time. That kind of workshop model, I enjoyed turning that on its head, which was that the person that was presenting the work or the story or the ideas for the story, I task them, I suppose, with asking questions to the group. That there are things that you want to know maybe about your own story, or about how it came across to people, or what they're interested in that you would like to know, which requires you to be aware of your own story and your own feelings about it. So it does put the onus on the storyteller to get the kind of feedback that they're looking for. You can also opt to just say, I'm open to whatever it is you want to say, and in which case we have a lot of ground rules for how to give constructive feedback to people. But what I wanted to focus more on in this short little session was just to give you a little model of something that we moved into when COVID hit, which was to start doing virtual workshops, which we had started 5 years maybe before COVID hit, was offering workshops online on via Zoom and other video sharing conferencing software. But I was working at the time when COVID hit with a national group that supports nurses and home health nurses who visit their clients' homes on a weekly basis. And all of their clients were mostly mothers, first-time mothers, so either pregnant or with a baby, an infant, up until age 2. So supporting them in becoming mothers. And so these nurses were taking on a lot. So all of these mothers are living with significant risk factors. Most common is living in poverty and all the things that intersect with that. So violence in the home, very high, housing insecurity, very high, food insecurity, very high, lack of education, formal education on the part of many of their clients. So these nurses are really, and high substance abuse, all those things. These nurses were showing up at these homes that oftentimes were unsafe even for them. And being nurses and being social workers and being friends and being mentors, all of these things, therapists, kind of all rolled into one job. The impact on them was great, and the impact of the pandemic on them was great in that they couldn't do home health visits anymore, and they were used to holding babies. They were used to sitting next to these moms and holding the moms in many ways, and teaching the moms how to mother their babies. And they were unable to do so. So as hard as that practice was before COVID, and we were doing work with them and having them talk through what they were living through and doing that work, and the impact of the multiple levels of trauma that were then becoming, for many of them, vicarious trauma or relational trauma. When the pandemic hit, it was kind of a different kind of trauma because they couldn't actually be there in the same way that they knew they wanted to be and needed to be. So we shifted our workshop model, of course, from being these intense 3-day long workshops. We began offering these virtual workshops that were 6 weeks long to make a digital story. And the other option that they asked us to do is that many of these nurses just didn't have time to do a 6-week-long workshop. They just didn't. Or they did, but they also wanted another option, a shorter option. So I developed a series of hour and 15-minute, hour-long reflective writing and story sharing workshops. I'm just going to kind of roll you through how those ran. So they were held on different days and different times so that nurses from across the country could log in. And they were supported institutionally, by their organization, the Nurse Family Partnership, to do this. They didn't need to take time off from their jobs to participate in any of this work. They were encouraged to do it, and it was actually funded out of their wellness and nurse retention initiatives because they were seeing so many nurses burn out before COVID. And certainly during COVID, massive amounts of burnout, massive amounts of that vicarious and relational trauma or secondary trauma. So I'm going to try and share the screen now so I can show you a little bit about what these look like. Hopefully you can see that. So we did have a couple slides. I don't usually like to use slides, but in a presentation like this to you all, I thought it would be helpful. So each week we would have a 1-hour session where nurses from across the country could log in. And there was a short description on the flyers that we would send out to the nurses. And they have upwards of 2,000 to 3,000 nurses across the country. So at any given session, there might be 5 nurses and there might be 30 nurses. And we got varying degrees of that. So I wanted to create a way of running these workshops that was scalable with those differing numbers. So we would always, I'm going to skip right past this slide, but this is exactly how I'd kind of run the workshop. We would start with breathing and a reading. So we'd have a centering exercise that included a reading. Usually that was a poem that I would choose. We would breathe for about a minute, intentional deep breathing, or at least invite people into that space to separate this from the rest of their practice for the day of being on their phones, video phones with these mothers and their young infants. And we would breathe, and then I would encourage people to continue that breathing, of course, otherwise they'd be dead. But to encourage the breathing and the closing of the eyes, and just like really taking one out, making a delineation between the rest of the day and this practice we were about to enter. And then I would introduce that reading and begin reading. We'd come back and have some introductions, and maybe that introduction would have something to do with the theme for the day. So each of these exercises, these kind of modules, would have a theme. And I'll get into that in a second. So that first poem, for example, is called Wild Geese. And the focus of this session, this 1 hour and 15-minute session, was on forgiveness, for example. We do some kind of introductions where people just quickly introduce themselves, but then also gave some information, whether it was a short story about their name, or we would sometimes play color bingo, and I would say, grab anything orange that's around you and tell a story about it, about where you got it, or what you use it for, or when you need it, or all kinds of things. So we would do color bingo, or something a little silly to kind of ease into the storytelling. Sometimes more serious storytelling, reflective storytelling that was going on. Then we would watch a story from our archives, and sometimes those would be made by ones that were made by nurses, some by other nurses. And what I mean by watch a story is mostly in our workshops, people make these short movies called digital stories out of the written story that they eventually land on, or that lands on them. You can watch some of those at another time if you want to go to nursestory.org to watch nursing stories specific, or storycenter.org to watch all kinds of other digital stories. You can see that. That wasn't the output of these smaller workshops. In any case, we would watch one of those stories that, again, had something to do with the theme of this module, which again, for this one, as an example, I said was forgiveness. And then that would lead us into a writing prompt. So here's an example of the story that I would show, and press play and show it. And then we would get to the prompt. So these prompts were all designed to do at least one of two things. And one was to lead people into, they could choose to answer these prompts, and they're all designed to do one of these two things. And the two things would be, one, either go deeper into one's own work in the world right now and their experience living and working and caring for these moms and babies during COVID. And so maybe what you could either do that and take this prompt to explore your current lived experience and what was really going on for you and how were you handling it or not handling it. Or they were also used as could be used as an escape from the current moment. Because I think people really needed a chance to escape as well. So a chance to process, and a chance also to escape, which a lot of us had a hard time doing during COVID, of escaping. We couldn't go anywhere. And you know the drill. So all of these prompts were designed for those two things. I would then give people 15 minutes to turn off their Zoom camera, go write, and come back. And this is the part where we get back into that idea of the story circle. So because we only had limited amounts of time, we certainly didn't have time like we do in our in-person workshops, or even our 6-week workshops, where everybody gets a chance to share with the entire group where they're at and give feedback or receive feedback on their story. So I did something else instead. And what I did was use the breakout rooms feature of Zoom to put everyone in the workshop into a breakout room of 2 people. And so again, these nurses didn't know each other. So you're in a breakout room with a stranger. And I gave people around, I think it was 6 minutes total. So these were short pieces of writing that they did in their 15 minutes. So not a long time to read it. So what I wanted each person to do, and I think it's on the next slide here, about these story circles was for the person to go first, one person to go first, to read their story to the other person, for that person to listen deeply and respond with one appreciation, one true appreciation, like something that they really loved and something that they were curious about with regards to the story. And then they didn't need to answer that question at that time. In fact, there wasn't time to answer it, but they were just left with a question or a curiosity that someone had about their story. And then they switched places. And I would shoot a little message to them through Zoom to let them know it was time to switch places and to then for the other person to share their story and have it held. And it was profound. They would then come back to the group. One or two of the people, if we had time, would then share their story out to the larger group. I would ask people just to write in the chat one word about how that felt, how that experience felt. And so people would do that. And then they did have the opportunity at the end of the session to send their written script to us along with a picture, and we would turn it into a story, a digital story for them or with them, or they could have it published out, their picture and their written story on a page that we created for them. So if they did want to actually kind of produce something that was public out of this workshop, they could. But the piece that was profound to me is that, again, normally in these workshops, we had time for everyone in previous workshops to share their ideas. In these workshops where I put two strangers together into a room, I found it to be incredibly profound. And what was profound about it was the pressure, in a way, that there was on each person to listen. I guess that's not an eloquent way of putting it. It's the honor that people felt for being perhaps the only person in the entire world listening to this person tell their story or share their story, and that they were sharing it with a stranger, a relative stranger. When we're in large groups, I think sometimes when we know that someone is going to be sharing something and that our group is supposed to respond, you might say to yourself, well, if your mind starts to wander, well, that's okay, because someone else will have something to say, I'm sure. So I won't necessarily be called upon, and I can let my mind wander or check my email or do whatever. When you know that you're the only person in the world listening to someone and having the charge to hold someone else's story, I think that responsibility and privilege becomes a very rich one. And so I felt that people paid a whole lot of attention to each other because of this great privilege or responsibility that they had to listen to one another and to respond with just an appreciation, a sincere gratitude, and a curiosity or question. And so that is how these workshops ran. And you can see some of these stories or read them by going to nursestory.org. And if you look at projects, there's one called Voices on the Frontline. I can bring up the webpage here. And it looks a little something like this. Let me go ahead and share the screen so that you can see it. So these are videos that were then made out of people's stories that we actually put together for them. These are all one picture stories with their voice. And then there are also written stories down below that aren't movies. So we have a lot of these that you can click on and read the story and see the picture that they chose to put with it. So again, that's at nursestory.org in the project gallery, right up here, projects and frontline voices, or voices on the front lines. So I'm going to stop the share here and just say thank you for listening and for caring, and for whatever work you're doing that relates to this and relates to how we hold each other's stories and our own. If you have any questions for me, I can be reached at daniel@storycenter.org. Thanks so much. Wow,
what an amazing presentation. So grateful to Daniel for providing us with that recording. And it's just, you know, it's great to see we focus a lot on our residents and clients and all of that sort of thing, but seeing how this can work with our staff as well, and how beneficial it can be. You know, he brought in a lot of different approaches there, and even with the digital storytelling, we are going to do a session on that next year. So definitely watch out for that one if you're interested in finding out about digital storytelling. That idea of just the one picture story can be incredibly powerful. So that's really exciting, and I just love the common thread, I think, through all of these presentations has been the deep listening. So amazing stuff. Definitely, if you've got questions for Daniel, please pop them in the chat and we can definitely pass them on, or any feedback or comments or whatever. I'm sure he'll be really grateful to hear any comments. So yeah, so and by all means go and visit the website and check out some of those stories, because they're absolutely fascinating. All right, so the last bit of our presentation today is actually the work of Tricia Jenkins, who is, as I said, she's from InsightShare and Digitales in the UK. So Tricia, unfortunately, again, couldn't be here, but she's actually sent us some information about 2 important projects that she's been working on. Before I jump into those projects, I just want to give you a little bit of an introduction in terms of the methodology that she uses. So it's called Participatory Video and Most Significant Change Methodology. So participatory video is basically, you can see the definition here, a set of techniques to involve a group or a community in shaping and creating their own film. And the idea behind it is that making a video, it's easy and it's accessible. It's a great way of bringing people together to explore issues, voice concerns, or simply to be creative and tell stories. But it's really about action, creating action, having that reflection, and then action again, advocating for change, putting their voice forward. Very collaborative, and it's a self-representation, so the people actually present their own story. Call and response, again, it comes back to that action. Collective ownership of communication, so the people that create their story are the ones that own that story and communicate it in the way that they want to tell it, and using a range of different techniques. So there's a really quick video here which I think just gives a really great basic explanation of what participatory video is. So Georgie, would you mind just showing that one, please?
Introducing InsightShare. We are people that work together to make change. We look for local solutions and help create action. The way that we do this is using a method called participatory video. It's a way of making videos with all the community, but participatory video is more than just making videos. It's about getting people to unite and plan together to make change in their communities. Let's take the example of a community who have used participatory video to make a change. At the beginning, the group learned to use the camera through easy games and exercises. Each person teaches the next how to film. Anyone can do it. InsightShare helped the group to focus on what is important to them. The community were facing a water crisis. They discussed the possible causes for the lack of water and suggested several solutions. Then the group organised their ideas by drawing a storyboard. The group decided who will film, who will talk and where. They watched the video straight away and decided whether to show it to the wider community that evening. More people got involved. They talked about the issues, possible solutions and what to do next. Over a few days, several new groups formed to make videos on related issues. Everyone in the community had a hand on the camera. The community have full control over their videos. They decide what to keep in the video and who will see it. These videos were shared with the whole community. The videos were then shown in a neighbouring community. The ideas and solutions inspired them too. The local governor was also shown the videos and was asked to support these and other related activities. These videos are now being shared with other communities around the world and at international conferences on climate change and development. In this way, local experiences and solutions are being listened to and valued by donors, governments and scientists. Sometimes powerful people are difficult to speak to face to face. It can be easier to show a video to explain yourself. Through the internet, these films can reach a wider audience and can create large discussions, raise awareness or build support for your campaign. Participatory video is less about making videos and more about getting people to unite and plan together to make change in their community. It's easy and fun and has worked all over the world. We all have valuable knowledge. We are all experts. You too can unite, organise and take action. InsightShare will help your group learn to use participatory video. Then you can pass it on to others. InsightShare, amplifying voices, connecting worlds, inspiring transformation. To see participatory video in action or to get involved, go to www.insightshare.org.
All right, thanks for that. So that gives a really good overview of what participatory video is and the power of it and what it can actually do. And I don't know that there's really any of it. If any of you know of anybody that's actually using this approach in Australia, I'd love to hear about it, because I just think that we can use this approach certainly in a lot of different ways in Australia with different communities and things like this. I think it's a very adaptable approach. If you want to go to the next slide, Georgie, this is actually a video of the participatory video approach in action. The video is 4 minutes. I think we do have time to really quickly share it, because this is actually the work that Tricia's been doing, and the project is about financial inclusion for persons living with disabilities in Uganda. And so this is just a little summary of where they're up to halfway through the project. So, Georgie, do you want to show this one? And then I'm just very mindful, I want to leave a little bit of time at the end for the questions, the Q&A.
nazaalibwa nga ndi mukosefu wa mugulu okujja ku isomero ery'abalema liri e Kampala beetayo Kireka Rehabilitation Center. Eyo namalayo emyaka 2 nga tuli mu training. Nze nakola kyebeta metal fabrication ze bampa ekyuma kya welding machine wabaawo yange maku kumbe yali mwibi era yakola kwino okumbuzabuza paka ekyuma kyange kya welding bekyambuzibwaku
namutwalanga ku isomero nga bayine bamukuba nga abaana bamulemesesa okusoma nazaala omwana owundi yabaako obulema ab'ekika baakoba ati omukazi ali kuzaala agaana agadoofu yeena weesibako oyo funa abakazi abandi abanakuzaalira abaana.
Yali muvubuka asobola okwekolera bwe naava mu buvubuka nga mpeziza emyaka 27 nafuna omukyala. Bwefuna omukyala wange twalina ye yazaala omwana. Bwazaala omwana bambi twali tuli mu mbeera ey'okutegeka amaka gaife. Awo obulwaire ge bwaja bwangemera. Omukazi wange ye nali naye ekiseera ekyo yamala yatuuka yaja ngabona embeera yendimu nabona nga tikeyenda munumba tivaamu aye nga munumba omwo amazima gali nti namalamu emyaka 10 munumba nga ndimu.
Awo nankanye ISF yaida mu iganga eyabalema byabakosefu mala awo newola esente mu feezo y'okubiri nakoba nti esente nayina ekirubirwa kyange kino kibandibako sente nenewola nagulamu naizaawo welding plant yange era nisaadi no nkola.
Opportunity yaleeta omusomesa Mase yatusomesa nga okutereka esente enkekereza nakoba kirungi kityo.
Nasooka awo nebaza opportunity olwokubanga yandeetera endowooza nga olwoni etandise okundeetera omumuli.
Natoola ku Edindi namusavingira namwigulira akawunti Edindi ngembanga edda saving diweireyo kuba twayiza ku mutwalo ine edisigairewo muteera ku akawunti ye kuba ekigendererwa ndi kwenda nfune mu akapoloti muzimbire mu akayumba ngafune edda abapangisa afuna nidino wane edaki edda amaadi ni mwinoola omusomi enatoola omufiizi.
Saawa dino abaana bange basoma n'omwana wange omwaka ogwo yali akamaliza obusomesa mu grade 3 ze teacher yasomera Kabwangasi PTC.
Nkuba amatafali oba nkufuna sente nakubisa amatafali nsuubula amenvu ntunda ebyeyo ntunda enku dona business nze nsobola okudekolera.
Awo genendera kale nsaba abasomesa aba opportunity batwongera abasomesa tufune emisomo nga bano bebatugamba okutusomesa okweterekera nguliti basomesa batuyamba ne baida ne basomesa bwotereka bwogema saving wo bwotalya sente nguli twamalawo
tubi nagifuna okuva mu opportunity banka era nga batukoba nti obulema tibutesobola.
How incredible is that, just empowering communities and, the most significant change methodology about them sort of identifying their key issues and coming together to come up with solutions and develop solutions. Then, of course, making the videos about it is a way of kind of sharing that message and bringing other people in. So it can be an extremely powerful approach. So just one last project that Tricia sent us information about. So she's doing some work with the UN on their Decade of Healthy Aging. And so it's really, the Decade of Healthy Aging is 2021 to 2030. They're creating a whole range of these participatory videos, video projects, and making sure with different communities, making sure that the voices of the people are prominent, in the start of the decade of healthy aging for older adults, and really setting the tone for making sure they're visible, the inclusiveness, having that meaningful engagement. So there's 3 projects that she's worked on. which are on the next slide. So she did projects with communities in Canada, Jordan and Tonga. They all had specific projects and they all made these participatory videos. The videos, I won't show them all now. They're all about sort of, I think, 20 minutes long. But I have the links here on the slide, and we'll be able to put those links up in the chat and also send them out in correspondence if you're interested in finding out more about this approach and thinking about if you want to sort of, get one of these projects up and running. So that brings us to the end of this webinar. Amazing presentations. Please go ahead and put any questions in the chat. There's been a few coming through. Georgie, I'm sorry, I don't know if you've picked any up that you can jump to that need to be addressed, or if anyone else wants to sort of jump in and share any comments or questions, any of the people on the panel, if you want to turn your cameras and mics back on, I'll open it up for questions and discussion comments. Mark, go ahead.
Oh, hi. Look, this has been incredible, really, learning, Xanthe. Thanks for putting all this together. I just have one question for Hedy, actually. Really thinking of the type of group, the participants that are involved with your group, and really how you can apply some of the principles that you have used in a broader way. So that's just a question to you, Hedy.
I'm actually not sure, Mark, in terms of a broader way. I've wanted my group to be sort of intimate and build up the trust. So we have a sort of very secure little circle of individuals that have, in a sense, nominated themselves, as well as, I've put out the word more broadly. It's like, are you interested in this type of meetup? So I've sort of set the parameters there. I mean, I just know that it's been so essential in terms of my coming to a wellness, and I feel also with the participants that it's something that can be replicated in many ways. And I certainly, I guess I'm a one-to-one sort of person, so it's been something that can be added to, like the other, I guess, initiatives. It's like, form your own groups, do it, and if not now, when, sort of thing, for heaven's sake, I'm nearly 80, so if not now, when, the question back to me. And, it meets very much my needs and also the needs of the participants there. I don't know in terms of doing a wider circle, and I also did it within the region here, and I worked with older people, myself included, under the U3A system. But I guess I found that the emphases that I wanted would come within my, it's not only situated within my own abode, it's also shared amongst the other people. So it has that stamp of, this is actually what we want, rather than trying to stretch it across and make it more applicable to a wider community. But everyone can do this. Everyone can set up their own little group. And I guess, really select and prioritize the things they're interested in. It could be a cooking group, for heaven's sake. It just so happens that mine tends to be spiritually based, and that comes out of my own particular need. So I don't know if that answers you or not, Mark, but it's sort of the best I could do at the time.
No, that's great. Can I ask one more question, actually, for Rekha? And a segue from you, Hedy, and it's really around skills. Like Hedy, I don't know what background you have, but obviously you're very skilled, and you have this cross section of art, creativity, art, and kind of I don't know whether you're kind of counsellor trained in any way, but you have this kind of spiritual approach. So Rekha, I know that we talked earlier and you're a social work student. I think the big idea is, who can run these sorts of groups? You know, is it anybody? Are they trainable? Like, you know, from your many years experiences in lifestyle, you know, do you think lifestyle staff can run these groups if they're trained? I mean, obviously there's time and money, resources and things. You know, the aged care, you know, is really short-staffed and deprived of time. Everyone is run off their feet. But do you think ideally, staff are trainable to do these sorts of groups that are kind of more transformative in nature rather than only for enjoyment and recreation? Or do you think it has to be supervised by kind of therapy-based people like, you know, social workers and therapists?
Lovely question, Mark. Thank you. I feel and I believe that everyone can participate in this program. It doesn't just have to be like trained staff. You can utilize volunteers. A family member can run this. A care staff can run this. Anyone in the community can run this program. What I would also say is, if somebody is having any difficulty, I know there has been some of the participants today asking about those Q questions that was created by Anna. I would definitely say have some of those quick Q questions handy, so that will help you guide what to ask. If you're stuck, what can you refer to? But getting back to what you said, you don't have to be a social work student, or you don't have to be a counselor. Once you know, like, to be respectful, learn to do the deep listening, learn to understand where people that just want to be heard. And if you can do that, I think everyone can succeed in this.
Thank you.
Thanks, Rekha. And I think that's really important, and it comes back to the purpose of doing the groups. You know, if you have a specific purpose to work with people, you know, with mental health issues, you know, then if you're specifically targeting people with particular mental health issues, then absolutely you would need, I would suggest that you would need a mental health expert. But I think a lot of these groups, especially in residential care, if we say they're therapy groups, people aren't going to want to come. They want to come for social interaction. Yes, things come out, and as people feel comfortable in terms of sharing with the group, that may take some time in terms of developing the rapport and the relationship and the psychological safety and all of that sort of thing. But, you know, I do believe that these groups can be run by lifestyle people and really anyone who has a specific purpose for doing them, such as Hedy, such as Daniel, such as, you know, Tricia. They're not mental health experts either, but they have expertise in storytelling and the approach that they're using. So I think that's what's really important. There was just a question here about somebody, Susan, that works in a library, and was asking about using story time or storytelling with different generations. And I think that is just such a lovely idea, and the community libraries are just the perfect space to do that sort of thing. There's ideas such as the living libraries, where people can rent a person or borrow a person to share their story rather than reading a book about it, which I think is a lovely concept. Certainly something that can happen in libraries, and the intergenerational opportunities in the library space I think are endless. So one of our future webinars as well will focus on intergenerational programs. So we'll have a range of different speakers that focus on those sort of ideas as well. But certainly, Susan, reach out and we can have more of a chat about any of those sort of ideas. Are there any other burning questions or comments? Susan Whiteland, interested in combination of art and health. Many have talked about social health. Please consider writing a proposal for a book chapter that I'm working on. Okay, awesome. Yes, we will definitely be in touch about that one. And Susan Anderson just commenting, a singer which can use that skill in story time. And again, it's coming back to bringing in those arts and the creativity, going back to my little, we call it an egg or nutshell. You know, a big part of the way that we do storytelling or different formats can, you know, draw on the creative arts in terms of dance, music, singing, voice, theatre, all of those things, painting, everything. So hopefully maybe even down the track we can do a storytelling webinar on which brings in the arts and uses different forms of creative arts for storytelling. So that can be another idea for a future webinar. So just mindful of the time, I guess, are there any final comments or anything just to finish up? I didn't see Greg's comment. Mark, did you?
Yeah, just that he talked about the Australian Institute of Intergenerational Practice, and I know that'll be a topic for later, but they do have a really interesting course, so just look it up, AIIP, and they do have a course which might be really useful. They have a framework as well around doing these sorts of groups and this kind of intergenerational lens. So thanks, Greg.
Yeah, and they have their symposium in February next year. So watch out for that one if you're interested in all things intergenerational practice. So I guess that brings us to an end. So thank you so much, everyone, for attending. Please visit our website if you're interested in finding out more, or contact us directly. Our next webinar will be in February next year. And we're going to be looking at the student experience. So the idea around transforming our future health and aged care workforce attitudes towards ageing and aged care through storytelling. So that's just another angle or opportunity or approach that we can use with storytelling. So again, thank you so much for joining us, and hope to see you in February, and enjoy the festive season. All right. Bye, everyone. Take care.
Bye.
Thank you.